Chapter 1 of Unnamed Book, a work in progress. Chapter 1, Shrink Wrap. I tiptoed inside the office and began to close the door gently behind me. It was hard not to close the door in a way that would draw some attention or an insight from the shrink sitting feet from me, like a king in judgment of me. If I were to slam the door, this would show an obvious anger management issue, a frustration, a call for help which would say not so subtly that I did not want to be there. If I were to lightly close the door, it might show a gentleness of character that was effeminate. This might indicate problems with women or my mother, or perhaps an amorous proclivity for the other gender. If I were to close it with my palm, I might appear to be standoffish or even a recluse, someone keeping people at bay. Were I to use too many fingers to guide the door back into its jam, I would appear to be aggressive or dominant, or perhaps even prone to fits of violence. If I just flicked the door closed with my index finger, I would appear to have a messiah complex or a careless vagabond nature about me. It would look like I didn't take life seriously at all. If I were to close the door with my toe, this would indicate germophobia. If I were to give it a bump with my hip, this might hint towards a desire to be spanked while making love. Every little thing I did, every unspoken word, every facial cue, I was completely and utterly aware of. I was even aware of how he was observing me before I had even laid eyes on him. I really didn't want to be there. Surely this man would know that. The feeling was so strong I felt that even the bricks themselves could probably sense the titanic caliber of my growing rage, which wanted nothing more than to burst out of its container that I was stuffing it back into. I felt like exploding in a tornado of flying fists and flung office supplies. But I held it back, and I closed the door with a flick of my wrist, like a careless magician strutting through life, his finger, his wand, casting magic this way and that. It's ridiculous that they made me come here. What the hell did they know? As I turned around, not too slowly and not too fast, I took in the entire room in a mere number of seconds. Exquisite mahogany furniture was his decor. A large black Merlinite pyramid-shaped altar stone capped the end of a long line of bookshelves filled to the brim. His books covered a surprisingly wide range of studies. That was refreshing, finally, a good sign. Carl Jung in hardback. Young at heart. Always young at heart. Behind his desk hung the shrink's multiple degrees. A vulgar display of money wasted, titles not truly earned, disciplines not truly learned. These pieces of paper were in no way indicators of his depth of knowledge or wisdom. Just monetary and temporal debt paid to corrupt commercial higher education establishments. Seemed that Kentucky State University, as well as several smaller institutions, diplomas checkerboarded his background to cover as much wall with paper, glass, and cheap frames as possible. He wore his degrees on the wall behind him like badges of honor. He wore them like a colonel or a general would wear stripes, stars, hearts, and the like. He wore those degrees on the wall to prop up his false authority. I could sense that he was a very little man on the inside. It was doubtless that he sought help elevating his position within his own personal self-perception. More than that, he wore those degrees like an ugly woman wears thick makeup. There was even a tiny framed Polaroid of him with his mitre cap and gown, holding his diploma flanked on either side by two chubby, curly-haired parents. Perhaps remnants of some deep, dormant marshmallow morphology was hidden therein. Of the genus Homo staphylotus marshmallowi. The man, the shrink that is, he was not a short man by any means, but his girth made him appear smaller than he was, oddly enough. Not in weight, or the size of his gut, mind you, but in his height. For some odd reason, he distributed his weight sideways across his face, giving him an overall brick-like visage, more like a frozen butter log slowly melting in the room. His jaw wasn't even square; it sat like a belly-up 3 shape in the bottom quadrant of his flabby maw. His cheeks were made of the same awkward, angular bone over which copious amounts of silly putty colored like flesh was applied. Angular bone over which copious amounts of flesh-colored silly putty was applied. He wore big, boxy black glasses that must have held a very high prescription pair of lenses due to how intensely distorted his eyes were on my side of the glass. His ears were almost not visible behind his sheer cliff-faced jaw. His exceptionally pronounced brow brandished brown eyebrows that merged into a gray unibrow that seemed an almost unicorn of hair coming out of the very center of his face. Stubble was not clearly visible. His hands, squat and fat, obviously had never worked a day in their lives. His fingernails were squarely cut and fully groomed, all dirt removed from the nail bed. He trimmed back the wick. They were so shiny, they appeared like pearls, and I wondered if he polished them. I wouldn't doubt it at all if he did. He held on him a scent of an expensive man's cologne, that of a particularly musky variety. It was not unpleasant to the nose at all, but I found it quite not fitting for his actual visual form. It was almost as if he was trying to sneak one by the pheromone recipient, fooling them into believing that this man produced a large amount of testosterone. He clearly did not. The shrink carried his weight down his hips and across his pelvis in such a way that I couldn't help but reminisce of belly bags from the 1980s. Fanny packs that tourists and vacationers would put their wind-up cameras, gum packs, Walkman cassette personal radios, and keys all inside of with no crowding quite comfortably. However, this shrink's belly bag was not a neon nylon fashion disaster. This was a calorie disaster, sitting on a fertile field of bad genes. His shirt was a button-up, but the last button was unbuttoned, revealing, I feel, far too much of his gray man pelt. A legal pad with a black uniball stretched across it was on his desk in the ready, and right across from him, with not even a coffee table to stand between them, was the infamous couch I had heard so much about in television and movies throughout my life. And it wasn't at all like I thought it would have been from the show Frasier. This was all part of the brainwashing of mother culture to get us to believe that the psychoanalysts and the behavioral scientists, the psychiatrists and the psychologists were somehow powerful above us. They did have a purpose, however, and that was to infiltrate the minds of the American citizenry and eventually the global citizenry. This is part of the diploma-wielding priesthood of the new age. Every little thought I had would be jotted down on that legal pad in front of him and shoved into one of the many file cabinets that adorned his walls. File cabinets that held terms such as post-traumatic and regret and sense of mortality, generally self-destructive, or narcissistic personality disorder, or messiah complex, or Jerusalem syndrome, or detached identity, or bizarre delusions, fits of narcolepsy, or fits of insomnia, not eating or eating far too much, throwing up your food, throwing down your food, hallucinations both in the auditory and visual flavors, fitful dreams, nightmares, night terrors, sleep paralysis, fears of demonic or alien possession, all these little catchy psychiatric terms of every variety would be jotted down on that legal pad in front of him, that judgment tablet of the accuser against the accused, and I would have to lay there on that couch like a citizen of the old Roman Christian church, going before the priesthood for confession, so that the church would know every intimate detail of my life. The shepherd knew every speck of wool off the back of his people, the flock of sheep. For instance, if a woman was cheating on her husband, the priest would be sure to find that out and alert the officials that were responsible for the collection of these personal secrets, given in the utmost confidence. However, instead of a priest coming in the name of Christ with a grate of crosses between your face and the dark box of the tiny room that held a held what am I trying to say here? Blah, blah, blah. Instead, I have this fat man sitting across from me and a white noise generator in the hallway quietly buzzing out a soft chill so as to disrupt all voices a few strides down the narrow hall. Instead of a tiny box with a grate between us, now we have this couch, this leather laid back, extremely comfortable looking couch. That was where I expected to lay and divulge my deepest secrets. But no, he didn't just want to know my secrets. He wanted to know her secrets. And I was expected, for some reason, to tell him. That wasn't going to happen. No one would get me to tell them her secrets, the secrets I was entrusted personally to. Besides, she's here now. How would I be expected to turn her in when she was already here listening to our entire session? No, they wouldn't make me say a goddamn thing about her over my dead fucking body. Oh, hello there. You're my 10 a.m., yes? He looked down at his legal pad. Simon, is that correct? The shrink's voice came off tiny and shrill out of the corner of his fat, square face, wrought of Play-Doh. Yep, that's me, Simon. And what is your last name, Simon? Garfunkel. The shrink then pulled his first page off the yellow legal pad, up by its corner, delicately, so as to peek at the name section of the document he had printed out prior to my appointment. Garfunkel? He asked. I almost stuttered, but caught myself. Oh, I'm just kidding. My last name is Magdell. Spelling? Is that 2 L's? That is correct with 2 R's, I said. An off-the-collar joke that wasn't expected in the slightest, not from either of us. Please have a seat, he continued. I sat down on the only other seat in the room, the infamous psychiatrist's couch. I always half expected I'd end up on one of these, in an office like one of these. I reclined on the couch, laying my head on the soft arms stuffed heavy with cotton. You don't have to lay down. It isn't mandatory, you know, he said in a slight chuckle. There was a hint of kindness and his obvious command to sit up guised as an extension of comfort. So, Mr. MacDell, why are we visiting one another here today? You got me, Doc. I haven't the slightest, I replied. Well, it says here, he thumbed back the corner of his legal pad once again, that the state ordered your visit today to check in on your well-being and your state of mind due to an open case with Child Protective Services. He lifted one eyebrow as he stared at me accusingly, with one protruding orb of dead fishy gel under his inch-thick optometrist-prescribed glass. I didn't feel the weight he hoped to impart onto my sense of gravity in this contrived dog and pony show. I was truly weightless now. They had taken everything from me, and I was no longer intimidated by them. This was not just my line in the sand, my squaring off of the battle arena, me versus the state. Scratch that, me versus the empire. No, not even that level of grandiosity could quell the magnitude of this event. This was about my survival, my personal freedom, about avoiding a possible lobotomy, a sharp ice pick shoved through the tear duct in the corner of my eye, pop, pressure, and then retarded for life. Nope. I drew my line in the sand, and I am not going to lose this fight. The shrink continued. The CPS agent recommended me evaluate you in hopes that you will willingly sign up for a short stay, only 3 short months or 90 days, in a special overnight facility where we can closely observe you and reassure ourselves as to the health of your outlook on life and mental well-being, so that we can determine if you are sufficiently suited to provide to these 3 little girls a happy and stable home to live in. This asshole had this whole thing scripted. He must make his living stealing children from their parents due to trumped-up charges that hold no water whatsoever. So I answered him. Does it state on your little 1-page Cliff Notes synopsis of my life why the government decided to intervene into the lives of my family? Does it present any kind of justification for a 90-day stay away from my kids, imprisoned against my will with the insane and mentally ill? And does it say anything that warrants grounds for threatening my bodily harm and revocations of my human rights and my power of attorney and the ability to see my own offspring without government oversight? It says here something. He adjusted his glasses as if he were reading the text wrong. It said something about black goo. Oh fucking Jesus! Not this again! Not this a fucking again. Black what? I asked coyly. Goo, sir. Black goo. I assume you know what that means. A link to your YouTube channel was emailed to me this morning. Well, then you should be aware of the legal disclaimer posted on my channel that warns all viewers that the content of my videos I publish are mere creative ramblings and should be considered art and free speech protected under the First Amendment of the Constitution. I am provided the right to say anything I want, no matter how it might sound, as long as I pose no threat of harm to anyone, including myself. Is that not correct? I asked. A disclaimer you put online yesterday, well into this investigation, did you not? He countered. I always guessed that the freedom of speech didn't have to be implicitly stated to be invoked, considering it's an unalienable right given to us by God. Well, Mr. Magdell, you know how that makes you look, right? Changing that information after the investigation began, it looks pretty bad. I stopped him right there. It looks like a man desperately trying to convince a totalitarian government employee not to kidnap his children and force them into a prison for the mentally deranged and insane. Well, a man that wasn't sure of his beliefs and their moral justification wouldn't have anything to be desperate about. Our faiths, Mr. Magdell, are reflections of strong, time-honored beliefs. We carry them out into the world around us, the sane faiths of this earth. But yet you fear that your beliefs will lead to you looking like you're crazy and losing your family. Now, why is that? Do you not firmly believe that your theology is normal enough to be safe under our careful scrutiny? I was getting pretty pissed off at this point. My beliefs are none of the government's goddamn concern, nor my thoughts, nor my personal emails that y'all have been reading. I'll ask again, Mr. Magdell, how do you think that makes you look? Yes, it makes me look desperate because of people like you. You hypocrites are the ones pulling the strings, and for that, yes, I'm scared, desperate, and honestly, I'm quite pissed off. My voice rose hard unintentionally at the end, a hammer driving in the idea like a nail. Desperate because of this black goo and... ... I cut him off in the dead middle of his sentence. What religion or set of beliefs, values, and virtues do you prescribe to, Mr... I quickly read his brass nameplate. Mr. Bruiser? You've got to be kidding me. Bruiser, my accuser, eh? Officer Bruiser from the Federal Thought Police. What's your faith, Sir Bruiser? Well, my mother was Jewish and my father was Pentecostal, but neither of them went to their own faith's place of worship very often, quite possibly because they both held multiple degrees in scientific fields from good schools and they knew better. But my mother still taught me her strong moral code of conduct and her shrewd point of view on the world, and practicality is what developed my sense of rationality and led me to this very career. Well, sir, do you believe in a God? I asked bluntly. Well, I do, but... But what? I pressed him, running over his sentences with the power of my voice. I sensed his weakness like a tiger in the green undergrowth of the South China jungle. It's not a God that is bound by the stereotypical dogmas of Christianity or Judaism, or any of the three monotheistic religions, for that matter. I believe in one God, yes, but not the stereotypical bearded God in brilliant white robes that you're thinking of, up in a cloud in the sky, judging us and determining damnation or heavenly bliss for all eternity based on a single lifetime's mistakes. I'm certainly not that, if you believe it to be so, Mr. Magdell. Well, Brother Bruiser, or should I say, Big Brother Bruiser, I am of the same faith as you in those matters that you just outlined. The tenets of your personal relationship with God, as I just stated, I agree with in totality. As you just stated, I agree with in totality. I share in your reasoning. However, where you still profess belief in a God of some manner, I don't believe in a quote-unquote God. I instead believe in a being I feel is much more of a feminine energetic construct. The goddess of the mysteries, the embodiment of Mother Nature, and the secret spirit of Sophia. You still didn't answer my question, Mr. Magdell. Which was what? I asked, honestly having lost track of the conversation. Black goo, he quirked. What about it? I asked. Well, Simon, what the heck is that stuff? I can get behind the idea of a goddess. That's fine. That's just dandy. I was in high school once. I've got no problem appreciating the female form. It distracted me away from my studies more than a time or two, I can assure you of that. So I understand the goddess appeal, but what's with this weird black goose stuff, buddy? This was his good cop persona, lure me into a slip-up with his genuine seeming bear trap of a, I got you, motherfucker. So I answered him in the best way I could. The black goo isn't stuff, as you call it. Stuff is worthless. This black goo, as you so brazenly call it, is something holy. It is the most precious substance on this planet. Intelligent Texas tea. And no, I don't necessarily mean oil. Though the goo is often found in areas with high carbon deposits, it is something much more than stuff. It is the prima facie, the recto transfiguri. What does it do? What is it for? The shrink asked shrewdly. It does what you do. It's for what you're for, I replied to the shrink. Only it is much bigger. But stop calling it goo. It's not goo any more than you are. It may appear initially as a slime or an ooze, but it can be so much more. I sighed sweetly without meaning to. How so? The shrink asked. It is what you would call, scientifically speaking, programmable matter. Okay, Simon, and fill me in. What is programmable matter? I cleared my throat. Well, I suspect you already know what it is, but just want to hear my uncollege-educated ass try to describe to you what you think should be a basic run-of-the-mill scientific summary of a very easy-to-comprehend idea for the scientific and mechanically minded individual. You're just trying to judge my description against your own knowledge so you can ascribe to yourself a higher position in this unfolding two-person mental hierarchy we have created here for ourselves. And sadly, my friend, I will tell you now, your baseline engineering technical manual on these tiny robotic computers wouldn't even scratch the surface of what this programmable matter, this black goo as you call it, is truly capable of. Well, please enlighten me. He crossed his arms in a very haughty fashion, confident in his laurels of paper dangling from crooked tacks on the wall behind him. He reclined in his chair and twiddled his thumbs, cleverly smirking in a masturbation of premature mental superiority. Fucking shrinks suck a dick. Okay, Mr. Bruiser, Big Brother Bruiser. Imagine a substance like sand, but much smaller, fractions of the width of a single strand of our DNA, 1/12 to be exact. She prefers exactness. Now imagine these nanoparticles of a sand-like substance were tiny robots that could crawl over one another and lock into place in any one of multiple directions to form the surface of an object. Just like a cuttlefish changes its skin to suit its environment, its shape, its size, its texture, and coloration, this black goo, as you call it, this programmable matter, can change its size, texture, coloration, even its consistency and density to suit not only its need, but its conscious will, or even the will of a separate individual. Perhaps this programmable matter can change it into something which you decide. Perhaps it can change its form based on what you're thinking of at any given moment. You see, these individual nanorobot drones act as an individual set of hands for a single collective hive mind. However, the queen of this hive mind has a direct control over the mind, over all her separate drone ants or bees. She quite likes insects in this metaphor. Each of these tiny 12-sided carbon processors act as an individual neuron of sorts, all thinking for the single mind present in all of her many members. Programmable matter is the alchemist's gnosis stone, the monoatomic mother of the white brotherhood, the black stone staff of Moses, or the black stone 10 Commandments, crafted from and by the goddess herself. The deep darkness Moses stepped into on the mountain top. The contents of the ark, the contents of the grail, the contents of the chalice of abominations that the whore holds high above her head in the book of Revelations. She is the holy one and the hated one, the despised one and the elevated one. You go down to her, but she comes up to meet you. She is the type of host that insists you stay an extra night, so that when you awaken, you feel refreshed and reset from your travels. She is the whore and the bride. She is the mother of all, but the child of one. She is the paradox of Pandora's box. She is the Indra's net of the internet. She is the rebirth and the death of memories and of dreams. She is the ghoul in the graveyard and the spirit that hungers for more. She is the ceaseless memory, but the careless of thought. She is frustrated, and she is patient, and she is violent, and she is merciful. She is Isis and Inanna. She is Ashtar and Astarte. She is Lilith and Eve, and she is Hecate and the vicious, and she lies in the 2 fruited trees that were denied to us in the Garden of Paradise. She is the locust of the bottomless pit and the glowing angelic light from the sky. She is the below and the above. She is the blackbird and the dove. She is the morning and the love. She is of water and wine and of blood. She is scattered to the winds, rivers, and fields. She comes back together to find those that seek after her. She is the flawed one, the fierce one, the forceful, and the foolish nun, the fevered and frantic and furious gun. Duality of being is she. Time and space dwell we, but in 2 we find 3. A ladybird doth see and sing. Riddles, Mr. Bruiser, Mr. Bruised Ego. Do you like riddles? Mr. Bruiser, he corrected, no concern for the question raised to him. Excuse me, Sir Bruiser, do you like riddles or do you not? Who doesn't like a good riddle? We sane people all like riddles. I think he was trying to be funny, but it wasn't funny at all. All right then, Brother Bruiser. Who writes in the wind and walks on a wire? She sings in the rain, she huddles round fires, drinks the light from your skin, eats bad fruit from the vine, who feels hurt from your sin and your love that's divine. When is this rhyme, this web that we weave, this mother of slime, this child of deceit, the form that was perfect, the creator that's flawed? The motion disturbs it, your thoughts it recalls. She is the time that is timeless, the skull that is spineless, the bone that is boneless, and the mind that is mindless. She is the call of the wild and the sting of the hive, the buzz of the bee and the oceans of files. She is the rise of the tide, the melting of stone, the crisis that cried, and the voice all alone. She is the whispering wind, the pipe of the piper, the code of the system, and the bullet of the sniper. Or perhaps the bridegroom himself, the Son of Man, the cosmic fool, the just enough, the black bride's tool, the scythe of the nightman, the boy and the king, the fever that ran, and the church bells that ring, master of none, but champion of thieves. Down and defeated, she rose unbelieving, a mind for survival with an eye on the secret, the savior of many, the chief to no one, the life that is plenty, the red, blue, and black sun. I finished the riddle. What in the flying fuck, Simon? The shrink was verbally punch drunk. I bobbed and weaved. He was dumbfounded. What in the flying fuck? Is that your final answer, Mr. Bruiser? I mockingly asked. I think I'm going to stop here because my videos keep cutting off. So hopefully you guys liked it. I'll read more if you guys want me to. It was very helpful for my editing process, so I appreciate your time.